Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Cranking along. It's been a long week, it feels like. Flipping along here. Jumping in, getting things done. Today's episode is brought to you by the letter O for OneLake. So, we're going to go through use cases for the OneLake File Explorer and maybe even talk a little bit more. I don't know how long we'll spend on just the File Explorer of OneLake, but there's also some thoughts around what is OneLake? Is there any things that you've found in working with OneLake? What are you putting into it? Like just some general OneLake experiences and maybe what we've experienced so far since Fabric has been out. So I think this is going to be kind of a good topic today and interesting to see where we land on things. With that, let's jump into some news. Tommy, you found some news from Darren Gospel.
Yeah, he's our favorite friend of the owner and creator of Dax Studio. And 3.1 release came out. Some really cool things. A Dax Studio command line utility, which I'm not gonna lie, I like terminal. I like command line utilities, especially if you get Windows Terminal. And this is just the ability to run a subset of command operations from the command line. You can actually, and so if you are more of that developer, you're trying to automate things, you can now utilize Dax Studio and automate some of your pipelines that you already have. There's some capture diagnostics, database dialogue, and more from your evaluation and execution metrics features, which again, Dax Studio is that tool, unlike Tabular Editor, which is kind of like the pros tool. Dax Studio is, I'm assuming, Greg Baldini's tool choice, because this is all the background of what's going on in Power BI.
Yeah, this is one of the things. This is one of the first tools I think I got exposed to, being able to go and create DAX statements. This is where you start learning, like, oh, DAX is more than just a formula in the formula bar. It's actually an evaluate statement and a whole bunch of other things that are occurring. Didn't know you could do so many things with this. Yeah, it's a really good tool, and I really like. It's interesting to see another command line support. I'm not sure I understand quite exactly where I would push that into a process. I get that you can do things with the command line and sequence a bunch of command line items together. Not sure why you need this yet. I know you like it, Tommy, but why?
So, I'm not going to use it in terms of my everyday, but with command line utilities, any of them, it's not just actually utilizing the terminal at that time. It's you can actually create, in a sense, local jobs if you wanted to run things over a series of files. Because right now, if I wanted to evaluate all the metrics in Power BI using Dax Studio, I'm opening up one file at a time. I can now run that across all files or all models in a given file or folder.
So is it more like I want to automate the extraction of testing from my model? Is where you're thinking this is going?
Exactly.
So run some performance tests, clear the cache every single time.
I'm going to grab coffee.
And then come back, and then 10 tests have been run. There's a file that has all the data in it, and you can kind of evaluate what's the performance of it. Interesting. It's interesting to just see how that's going to go. Anyways, I'm looking forward to it. I play around with it a bit myself, but I don't have any major needs for it at this point.
Yeah, I would say probably then the big thing for the normal Power BI Pro is the execution metrics. Adding some more features there to really see more of the numbers, the evaluation log. Mm-hmm. Like I love, like, this is so crucial, especially if you're wondering why your model's running slow or that one measure with that one table is incredibly slow. That's where you go to Dax Studio.
It feels like a lot of these features here that I'm seeing. It feels like some of the hand of Marco Russo is on this as well, right? So there's some other things here, like added support for obfuscated model metrics, and that's kind of something that Marco Russo touts a lot when he does his work on Dax Studio, right? Hey, you don't need to send us the model; just send us the Vertipack output, and it obfuscates things, and we now know, like, okay. It's not really important what you name things. It's just more important that this column, this relationship is bidirectional and connecting these two really large tables together. That could be slow. Like, so there's patterns I think that are evolving that they're illuminating to you, which is very fun there as well. I think for me of this release, more of the items around being able to save the output, I think has been very helpful. Like there's more buttons for, I think, that in the release. They're talking about capturing the diagnostics button. There's now another button in here. I thought there was another button around being able to save the output of things. So I like that. I think that's good. Those are things that are going to be more useful, I think, longer term.
Yeah, it's a great troubleshooting tools, even from, to your point, Tommy, looking at cardinality, the sizes of different things, like when you're optimizing your model, DAX Studio is a key part of that.
I wonder if people are going to move away from DAX Studio a little bit, because I think you get the same, maybe not exactly the same information, but you are able to get semantic link to do things as well. And so this is where I'm a little bit more torn now, because I'm seeing semantic labs. Like, for example, let me paint a picture here for you. Companies like to use Power BI things, but one of the arguments from Microsoft is, hey, if you're not going to use the Microsoft tools, we're not going to let you go, employees, this is the company talking to employees, we're not going to let you go use third-party tools to go do stuff. Like if Microsoft doesn't support it, it's not a thing that we can go do. Like, for example, calculation groups was not supported creation of them in the desktop for a long period of time. So they're like, you can't go get DAX Studio or Tabular Editor 2 for free and go use these tools because it wasn't supported by Microsoft. They feel that if Microsoft builds the feature, you should be able to use it. So for me, having semantic link on the side solves a lot of these problems, because you can do a lot of the things that you're already doing here. You can get table statistics, you can get measures, you can get relationships out, you can get diagrams out from the model. It's probably not doing the exact same things, albeit, but I feel like a lot of the capabilities are covered from DAX Studio inside semantic link.
Yes and no. I mean, you're dealing with cost once you run semantic link, because you got to run that from
Fabric.
From Fabric. So
Correct.
You're already incurring a cost. It's slower in order to get it run. Once you get it started run up, you got to point the right place. I would think so. If you and I did a race right now and I said, you create a Jupyter notebook, I'm going to get the evaluation metrics.
Yeah, but once you figure it out,
this is true.
The level of automation, like, so to your point, I understand what you're talking. But like, am I going to go to DAX Studio, run DAX Studio on 6 models that are in one workspace?
My local machine.
You're going to put it on your local machine. So what if I want more automation? So this is where I'm kind of going with the command line things and some of these other pieces. Like, well, if I'm really going to try to provide true automation, if I'm really am going to go build these insightful things, to be honest, I think me personally, I like the experience of the semantic link notebook experience. And then once I've learned the commands that I need to make, I would agree with you, Tommy. If I'm going to start from scratch, yeah, probably you're going to be faster in DAX Studio because all the big commands are ready to go. I'm clicking buttons, things are just running. It just works. I get it. But once I understand what I want to analyze of the model, my opinion here is you're going to want to do that over and over again on many different models every time you release things.
Oh, no, I agree with that. From a scaling point of view,
Yeah, so right now I would say, look, what is the equivalent feature that I need in DAX Studio? Go build it into a semantic notebook, and then run the automation there. Because I think you can also create measures. You can manipulate a little bit of the model. Anyways, it's just interesting to see the tools evolve in front of us as we're getting more options and to do the same stuff.
Make a lot of assumptions about the skill level of a lot of teams, though. For you, yes.
Well, but even you can make the same argument with DAX Studio.
For DAX Studio, you're not giving DAX Studio to
right. Like so semantic link part of Fabric in there. You just set it up versus third-party app, download it, figure out how to work it. Like there's the same thing. I think.
I mean,
same audience where you're looking at new tools. I agree with Mike from the standpoint. DAX Studio has been around for a really long time, and if semantic link is offering up some of those new capabilities within the Fabric ecosystem, then that's a great way to stay in the flow of where you're working.
Yeah.
Well, I am looking forward to that blog, Mike.
I've already been doing.
That's a great use case.
Yeah, I mean, I've already been doing videos with Stephanie.
You're doing it with Stephanie. That's right.
Yeah, so we've already done it. So looking forward to it. The blog's already done.
The blog's
already done. You can go look on RBI Tips. I'm already ahead of you. I already got the blog out there. So Stephanie Bruno and I have done a couple, exploring semantic link and writing things back and from the Lake House and some considerations there. So we're getting into it. We're actually doing some videos and training and demos around this because we think this is important enough that people should know this. This is really, I think, where more advanced developers will spend their time, right? This is not for the average business user.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm a reader, so I'm looking forward to that. Let's convert that to a blog. I'll get my AI overlords to
go ahead. It's already out there. Go to Power BI Tips. I think I did it like 3 days ago.
That's awesome. Okay, I will be checking that out.
There you go. It probably won't be as much as informative as the actual video, but excellent. With that, let's jump into our main topic. Unless we have any other kind of openers or any beat from the streets, things that we're learning and working on. I'll point on one thing here that I'm working on with domains and capacities and workspaces. There's an interesting mix of what features can be delegated from your Power BI tenant down to domains. So I'm doing some investigation on it right now. An admin at the tenant level can delegate certain features to a domain admin as well. So think, for example, certifying data sets. Certifying data sets, you might want to have a IT level, admin side of this. But if you think about different domains, there's probably a leader inside your sales team, inside your operations team. Inside those teams, there is, let's call them experts or SMEs that are going to be creating their own content in that space. Having the ability for you to delegate to that team, the leader of that team, what is a certified data set or not, is actually really, I think, very relevant here. So there's some really interesting things that I'm looking into the Power BI settings. It's kind of documented well, but what actually comes out of the APIs and the scanner API does some weird things. So you can't really get the information out from the scanner API very cleanly as you can through the portal. So we actually had to go through each setting, every single one, and look at them and see what could be delegated and what could not. And some of them are on by default and you can't change them. So I'm not really sure. There's some things out there that I don't quite understand exactly what Microsoft's doing yet. It feels like this is not a fully baked idea. It feels like this is a half idea that is getting some traction around being able to delegate administrative properties. Anyways, just want to bring that up. Have you guys worked with domains at all in that fashion?
Yeah, I have a very similar experience where it's like, I feel like they're doing a lot of things right. And then there's just a lot where it's almost like you take a left and it's a roadblock. Like, oh, I wasn't expecting this here.
Yeah.
Why was this not, like it should be this, even though you're on the right track. It's on the right direction. There are a lot of things in the right direction with domains that make a ton of sense. But yeah, there's almost like what we talked about Git, where some of these features that almost you feel like would need to be required to be there are not there yet.
Yeah, it's just very interesting. It's weird because you look at some of these features. I'll see if I can add some notes on this one that I'm kind of working through. Don't seem to have the notes in front of me right now. But it's just odd. Like there are certain, if you think about the interaction between capacities and workspaces and then domains, capacities are attached to a workspace. So that has to link there. But there are settings at the capacity level that you may let a domain owner manage or not manage, or the tenant might delegate down to the domain owner. There's certain workloads you may or may not let them choose to turn on or off. You may override some settings. So I'm still trying to get my head around what is the hierarchy of the settings and how they work through each of the different layers. But it's not very clear yet. Anyways, something I'm just chewing on through domains, figuring out what works there. With that, let's jump into our main topic. Let's talk about OneLake. This is a blog article that comes directly from Microsoft. So the Fabric blog. Tommy, give us a quick overview. What is OneLake and why do we care about the OneLake Explorer?
So the blog article is specifically referring to the Windows application that you can download. That's basically the SharePoint for OneLake. And again, OneLake is the centralized place where all of our data is stored. Lakehouses, pipelines, all the data that you're going to be imagined in Fabric comes through OneLake. It's the bottom rectangle of your diagram of all your other artifacts.
Yep.
And OneLake Explorer really allows us for the very first time in any Power BI environment to simply easily upload any data. What we've had to do in the past, dealing with CSV files, Excel files, even images. Well, images was a non-starter, but even tabular type of data we had it to a SharePoint list directly connect to that. It was still not necessarily directly connected to Power BI. With OneLake or in OneLake File Explorer, we can say, hey, just move it to this environment or this workspace. And any business user who has that access can easily add that. And we can not only connect to that in Power BI, connect to it in a pipeline, connect to it in Jupyter Notebook, connect to it in any of our normal artifacts. That environment's available in the Fabric ecosystem.
Yeah. So it's basically OneDrive, the application you kind of use for SharePoint, right? Or storing your files from into the cloud. But it's like the same thing, but just now the lake houses. And we call it OneLake because it's not just a table that's a Delta table. It's a bit more than that, right? It's a lake house and potentially folder structures where there are files, individual files showing up.
Well, essentially, isn't it just a data lake? Or like Azure Data, it's like it's a storage mechanism.
It is.
Yes, but I think it's more than that.
With hooks into Fabric.
Right.
So it's already plugged into the systems that you're interacting with in terms of data. But at the same time, like it strikes me as like a much better, more seamless experience that's integrated into like Windows Explorer as opposed to like the other application.
Right.
Where you're early morning fog in the brain still. Your Lake Explorer, right?
Well, yeah. And
so,
I think
yes, but it only points at one lake at a single blob storage account, right?
Right.
I think OneLake is trying to be a service that is rendered back with a collection of lakes underneath of it. And there's a lot of other API.
Well, when you're interacting with all of your lakes, right, you have access to them in your storage explorer. And you can copy and paste files in there. It's just a little bit different experience. I'm saying like the one I like the OneLake one built in because it feels like everything else I interact with in Windows Explorer on my PC.
Yes. It mirrors the same experience as you would with the Azure File Explorer, correct? Right. Without some of the other features.
And we have this full integration again, not just with Windows for any user who's used a Windows computer, but then it's also that full integration in Fabric. I can pick and choose any of those new files that have been added. Actually, I remember one of the early demonstrations that Microsoft did wasn't with a CSV file, wasn't with an Excel file. It was with a marketing team using images and how that you can actually utilize those in Fabric too. I think something with generating AI images, but we have this now ability for the very first time. I think for us, we haven't given it a ton of love. That new ability where rather than my interaction with a business team on, okay, I'm going to create a SharePoint list for you, or I'm going to create a SharePoint folder for you and give you access to this. And Power BI can only connect to this, but it works. And we're now just add your CSV files here. Well, now that ecosystem, we've elevated that to a lake house, or we've elevated that much higher upstream on what we can do with that data. And I think that's really powerful.
I mean, yes. I mean, I would rather, I don't know. I don't use, so to be very honest, I don't use the OneLake Explorer on my desktop very much. It's not, if I need to get files up to OneLake quickly, or, I'm modifying something as a source, right? Yeah, I'm probably doing a little bit of work to get that information into the Lakehouse, and I'm doing it through desktop. There are use cases where you have, kind of supplemental data or things that are not really required to come from a specific list, or you want to make an Excel file that has a couple rows in it that you're going to clean some data with. I find that I'm doing a lot of these like side ancillary loading of data, and I'm just putting the file there, boom. And then if I want to edit the file, I go back to OneLake Explorer or open the OneLake and then just edit the file locally and hit save, and then it just gets changed, and then it can be updated inside the service.
See, I don't know if you're the direct use case for OneLake File Explorer.
What do you mean?
So my initial thought to who's using OneLake File Explorer is the business. It's someone who honestly is not touching lake houses that often, but they have access to a workspace because they're the ones who control files. My experience working internally was dealing with types of unstructured files all the time, coming from marketing, coming from operations, where these systems and platforms didn't have a direct API, didn't have a direct way to connect to them, but they had CSVs and they had export, and there are a lot of processes we created that had to be pointed to SharePoint or had to be connected to a cloud where these local files are going to be automated upon. It worked incredibly well, but the problem was it only was the analytical solution. It was only can be used in Power BI for a report. I couldn't use this in Power Apps because, again, it was a connection to a Power Query. I couldn't use this as from a database point of view or write back or any other type of application with this because these are all CSVs going to Power BI. The use case now is all these files, weekly files, exports, can now become part of a lake house, can now become part of so many other directions rather than just simply becoming a report and that's the end of the story. So I can now utilize my team to say, don't put it in SharePoint, put it in this other thing that looks very similar to SharePoint. Just drag your files here and we'll take care of the rest. And so I'm not just creating,
What's the value add here though? Right? Like from if I can connect to files in SharePoint, and this is already kind of a seamless experience where I can sync my, local Windows Explorer to my SharePoint folders, and I get a shared space, and I can connect to, that SharePoint location from, make it a source for Fabric and all the things I want to do as far as data connectivity. Does OneLake does this just make it more seamless? Like what's the big win here?
So for me, it's not just a reporting solution. Let's take an example. I have event data and I get event attendee CSV files, but I want to actually say, mark them, add info, their contact information, and they're all CSV files. Well, think of the ease of use now where people are adding these CSV files to OneLake. I can add them to a lakehouse. And now that lakehouse can be used in any direction outside of reporting. In Power Apps, now they have this place to say, okay, update this contact info. That contact information is now living in a lakehouse, coming from a CSV file from just people dragging, dropping OneLake File Explorer. That ease of use, or the amount of quick steps to do that, was not possible before OneLake, and especially the OneLake File Explorer. For where now we can actually use this database, so to speak, or this storage in any other capacity. And again, more than just a report. And that's to me where the biggest value add is.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so let me unpack what you're saying. Are you arguing that if you are a team of people working on Power BI files and you have a whole bunch of PBIXs around and you are going to kind of do a process that will check in, check out, or you need a place to put them or collect them together, are you recommending putting the PBIX files in a folder inside the OneLake?
No, take it back a few steps back. Think of the data sources or those raw files. Think of the CSV files people are exporting that's important to them, and they're utilizing that for reporting, but they probably have more use cases for that.
So let me retool my question then, or my statement then. So not thinking about saving the actual PBIX files into the OneLake, but more of we have supplemental data, or we have a whole bunch of CSV files being generated from a system that we're not able to automate, right? The goal here would be, look, I've got Fabric. If I can automate it, I will automate it. If these are the things that we just physically cannot automate, and someone has to go get the data, the table, and land it in a files area, and would your expectation be then, okay, once you have it in the files area, it's easier for you to go access it via a pipeline, a data flow, those kind of things, right? So now you can just say, okay, go here and find the content, as opposed to having to re-authenticate, go to SharePoint, go to a OneDrive location, which doesn't mean you can't do that thing.
Right.
It just means this is an easier method to do that inside the OneLake.
You're right on point, because I'm putting those suckers into a lake house. And again, if that marketing team or sales team or whatever the team is, which I found too many times, they need to do additional things, or they would like additional columns or markers on that raw data. again, before it's like, well, you'd have to update those Excel files yourself, but I can now put this in a lake house. Then I can now connect to that in Power Apps or another application or wherever else I would want to. It doesn't have to be Power Apps, but it can be anything. That data now lives in that lake house that can be now updated, structured, etc. Whatever I want to do. The marketing team or that team can now comb through it, modify it. Then we can report on it. But again, the reporting is one aspect of it, and it's not, I don't think, the primary solution here. It's a great one. It's going to be something we're going to utilize, but our ability now to take this data that is important to teams. And again, this is still all too common. APIs are, running crazy, but they're not for every solution or not available for every team. This now becomes a centralized repository for a team of data that's important to them, that we can build other solutions more than just the pretty bar chart or the report. Because now they can modify this. Now they can manage this, and now they can own it. And it's no longer something they're owning in CSV.
Let me ask you another question then. When you are looking at Delta tables that have been created through the OneLake interface, are you able to access those same Delta tables or manipulate them or edit them locally on your computer? Meaning, let's imagine I've made a Delta table. There's a pipeline. It's loading some data in there. I want to go look at it with my VS Code notebook locally, or go edit, or you write some Python against it just to test something. Can we do that? Can I point at a Delta table that is locally on my computer?
I would have to check the latest update. From my last experience implementing this for someone, no, but that was quite a bit ago. But
the files exist, right?
The files exist, but
the table's there. There is a Delta Parquet structure that already, it has the Delta log. It has all the other items that are there. Why wouldn't you be able to access that table or at least read it locally?
So let me ask you, if that's possible, are you getting somewhere with that? Do you have?
I am.
I feel like there's something.
Well, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to sniff out use cases. Like where can we use this one, right? One use case could potentially be is I have a lot of data coming in. There's potentially bronze, silver, gold things. I want to do some work locally, but I don't want to turn on my capacity, right? So my understanding is these, again, I don't know if this is right or not. We'll have to do some testing this with me maybe after the fact. But what if I do the work, I do a data load, those Delta tables are created and built. Great. I'm going to just go locally on my computer and I'm going to run some machine learning scripts. I'm going to bring a data scientist to things. Hey, here's where all of our tables live. You can experiment things offline because my computer has more horsepower than what I would want to be putting into a Spark notebook or whatever. Like I'm just going to do something with the data. Here's the output of all the final tables, right? Or maybe I want to manipulate those tables locally, or I want to change those Delta tables or add another version to it. Could I do that? And I think, based on what I understand so far, is I think you could do it. I think you could connect a Python notebook locally to one of those tables that are coming from a OneDrive like sync. It would then load the files that it needs. Now, granted, if your files are large, you could be pulling down a couple gigabyte files from a Delta table into your local machine, right? You may not need all that. So that might be a challenge that you would face with this because you don't need, all the files from every version of the table. You just need a couple of them.
Right.
Potentially. So that could be another use case.
So what does this do for business users?
I'm going to say not much, Seth, honestly. Looking at this, it's not super valuable, I think, at this point. Other than adding a couple files here or there, and then being able to edit, like there's a JSON file that maybe defines something or having some parameters that are going to be running a pipeline. Yeah, maybe I'll edit those slightly locally on my machine. But I don't think there's not a huge value opportunity that I'm seeing here.
I honestly don't think I could disagree more. And it's been a while since I've said those words, and it feels nice to
since last 24 hours.
And he says this with a very nice smile on his face. Dude, I gotta coach you here.
It's nice to wholeheartedly disagree.
Coach you into conflict.
And this is why. Because again, business users are dealing with a lot of unstructured data, and they're not comfortable. Say, go to
You
fabric.com.
keep saying unstructured. You mean like random file sources,
Fine,
CSV,
random,
Excel,
yeah,
whatever, right?
plug in any word
Not
you want.
JSON files.
Yeah.
Unstructured would be like an image or a video.
Yeah. Okay.
Or semi-structured would be
a lot of
JSON.
a lot of rumble and jamble and random files kind of thing.
Okay.
Plug in any word you want to, but we're all on the same page.
Yes.
What
words matter.
Files. Words matter a lot. So let's use random kind of thing to ease our English overlords, and AI overlords too. They're listening. So this random files that they're constantly dealing with, and I think being not compassionate, but being sympathetic to what they have to deal with on a daily basis with all these platforms, that they're not that how they're trying to actually make sense of this and manage these files. Well, yeah, we could do the SharePoint, but again, the problem with SharePoint is, for us from the BI point of view, is those are only one story, and that story is a Power BI report. With OneLake, this changes that whole story, because now those files, it's like, just point it here. It's not going to wow them to the point where they're like, I love OneLake File Explorer, I can't go without it. But the impact that occurs, where we're asking them, please, here's this one workspace or environment that you see in OneLake, add it to this folder, and now you can manage this in this application we built for you, or you can connect to it this way, or we can build any type of report for you off of this.
Yeah, but as a business user, though, right? Yeah. Like SharePoint is where my business lives, right? All my all my data, all my files for, review and analysis, etc. Like they're all in SharePoint. So what you're saying, I have to use a different storage mechanism for some of my data?
We're talking about, we're going to create when you're putting the same argument out there to me, where someone's like, so you're telling me I can't ride my horse anymore?
No, I'm asking what data do I have to put in OneLake, and what data can I keep in SharePoint? Because that's my team. That's where all my team's data is.
Yeah, the reason why their team's data there is because that has been the best solution.
Yeah, but
until now,
SharePoint offers a lot more, from team collaboration and flows and all the things that help me do my business. No, but that's where they live today. They're part of the business.
Okay.
So your argument is use OneLake. I'm like, okay, well, I'm the business person, so I move what part of my data to OneLake? Why do I have to use two different platforms now?
I think you're talking about different files, or we're having this conversation about different files.
Fine. No,
Excel,
I'm not.
PowerPoint. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they're random files to you for reporting because you're going to do something with them. But to me, they're my data for the business that I run.
I think what is a business user doing with 18 CSV files on a month, or that are all
manually putting them together into another Excel file?
Well, that's where we come in anyways, right?
Or and the recommendation has been, I think to Seth's point though, is you're already doing work with PowerPoint slides, your data of your team into a SharePoint site. Why am I worried? Why am I saying, okay, I'm going to split apart my process and say, okay, only the business files go here, and then all the data files go someplace else. There needs to be, to your point, Seth, I think there has to be a compelling story to say why I need to learn something new and put the files in a different place. If I'm not getting enough value out of that, what's the point? Why would I spend all the time and effort to get all the way over this new location?
Plain devil's advocate of the business user further. Tommy, why do I have to change for you? Can't you just go pick up my files from SharePoint? If you need them for your data things, can't you just look in SharePoint?
If we're simply reporting, probably not. But I'm making the argument a lot.
What do you mean probably not?
Hold on. So a lot of these if it's just simply we're going to build a bar chart for you from your CSV files, fine. SharePoint is a great solution. It's the default solution. I'm making the argument that a lot of these random files, teams would like to do more with. And they are doing more because they're going into these CSV files and Excel files and making edits and asking people to add a column. And there's formulas that we're still reporting on in Power BI anyways. There's a ton of use cases there. What if I move this to OneLake File Explorer, which again, saying you have to learn a lot, making a lot of assumptions here because
I didn't say you had to learn a lot. I'm saying you're separating out where all of my my stuff is.
Fine. If there is a need, which I would challenge that a lot of use cases, there is one to do more than just reporting and more just to see my data visual in a visual sense, then OneLake File Explorer allows me to put that data in a place that can be touched in multiple areas and interacted with in multiple areas. I'm no longer trying to manage saying, please don't edit column C in this Excel file because that will break everything. And I can now touch this in Power Apps. I can now point this to if another team or another system wants to actually touch that, interact with that data. Again, let's use that event attendee data to keep a flow going. I have all this contact information.
So, but here's where
and they don't have to touch that. They don't have to worry about it.
No. Here's where the value comes in for me, I guess. Okay.
I think you're getting to where I'm going to go here, Seth.
Because up to this point, I keep hearing you as, you're working with this business team, you're the business intelligence team, and my pushback on you is, okay, great. There's many ways you can go copy data from a SharePoint location into Fabric and get use out of it. So you're the BI technologist. You can figure that out. It shouldn't force me as the business user to conform to what you want, where you want my data. I work in SharePoint. This is where all my stuff is. If you want it, it's there. Go get it. That's the argument I have, right? Like you can go access the data in SharePoint. Conversely, though, I don't think that's the use case, right? What you're proposing is, what is the value for the business user? Business user, you don't have to build all these connections. You don't have to do all the hard work. All we have to do is we're going to move your analytics data into OneLake so that when you're interacting with these in Fabric, it's automatically available to you. We don't have to build anything. So that to me is compelling. It's like, oh, well, okay, so I'll just keep my business side presentations and things like that in SharePoint. But the compelling argument for me, the business user, is if I just throw this in OneLake, which is just a different part of my file, Windows Explorer, right? Now it's available to me when I go out to my workspace. My workspaces are now available to me in this place. Now that is a compelling argument. I don't think you had it, though, when you're talking about the BI team connecting with these business groups, because it's actually
pretty fair. Yeah.
What's the value there?
Yeah. I'm going to argue with that one as well. I think that's another point that you're trying to make here, Tommy, that I resonate more with. There's less friction getting from SharePoint to tables or lakehouses items than there is going right through the files area of the lakehouse. And let me give you an explanation here, Rye. I just did a project where I was trying to use a pipeline to go access a table of standard data from SharePoint.
Yeah.
Can't do it without a service principal. Can't do it without going into the SharePoint site and making some really, there's some other things you got to set up. So to your point, Tommy, if you're going to remove some friction of getting data that the business is creating into a place where I can use the analytical tools on top of it, it does make sense, I think, to bring those files closer to where the lake is living. Another thing that I find is difficult here is if you generate files or things that you are saving and putting them in the OneLake, there's no easy way to get them out. There's no download button. There's not a lot of I can't edit files inside the service yet. So like, for example, I've had a JSON file that defines some parameters for my pipeline. That pipeline needs to consume those parameters. And this could be something that's driven by dev, test, production, right? So this is a configuration file that may go with the lakehouse that you actually point to. It's the same name in each location, so that way you can deploy it correctly. But then when you're running the pipeline, it finds the file, it reads the information in it, and says, oh, I'm going to go talk to the dev server or the other servers. Great. But you can't edit the file. You can't change it in the OneLake itself. There's no editor for those kind of things, which maybe we'll get there and maybe we'll be edit those files. Great. But right now, if I use the OneLake Explorer, I can then see the file, download it, edit it, and then it automatically gets synchronized back. So I think that is valuable. I also like one thing I'm missing from this OneLake. If you have SharePoint, inherently in SharePoint, there's already versions of files. I don't know, Tommy, are there versions of files in the OneLake file explorer? Like, if I edit a file, does it make a version of it? And can I get the old ones?
I know there's a log directory on what occurred.
Yeah, I know that.
Version control. I'm pretty sure there's no version control.
So it's kind of, it is what it is.
Yeah, this is what it's always been. This is the way. So it is what it is.
Interesting. I wonder if,
but again, I'm not putting Power BI files in here.
No, it's data. Like, and
I know.
It's consolidating yet.
I mean, so the reason I'm pointing this out is I'm actively thinking about or looking at, all right, the Lakehouse is a great collection of files. Mm-hmm. There's these things called workloads that Microsoft has built. Everything you touch, a pipeline, a data factory, all those things are individual workloads. Why are not more of the workloads? I mean, the workloads all have access to the Lakehouse.
Right.
When third-party companies come in and start saying, hey, we're going to build a whole bunch of other workloads for your company, there's no reason why those workloads can't borrow portions of your Lakehouse to then create value on top of your data and spit it back out and put it back into your Lakehouse. So I really see an opportunity here that workloads or other things are going to, like you already see it today with the ADF and the pipelines, right? Those are two workloads that are leveraging the power of the Lakehouse to easily get files in and out. I for sure see a future where other workloads are going to be able to add more value. And so why not store your, PBIT files there, your templates? Hey, this is where I'm going to put them. If you want to go get a template, everyone in the workspace now has a common thing. Again, if we're thinking about centralizing the work that we do inside PowerBI.com, now we have all of our Power BI templates. And by the way, you can shortcut files to other workspaces. So I can have another Lakehouse somewhere else in the system that I shortcut myself into. So Tommy, to your point, right? Let's imagine I'm the individual who's in charge of creating all these CSV files in a folder for sales data or Salesforce exports or whatever the thing is, right? That folder, I believe, can be shortcutted to another Lakehouse, meaning I still maintain the ability to control and add more files into it, but I can easily distribute that to any other analytical lakehouses anywhere else in the business. So now there's this common place of, okay, well, we can just share things across different teams and shortcut them in. And now we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. So there's potentially another option here that's like, it feels to me like there's more potential than what we're seeing here initially. At least that's what I'm looking at.
I honestly, that's one way I didn't consider it for more for the BI team. And I'm going to mention something Seth talked about, to kind of how we changed the conversation or what was more of the value add. If I came to this and said I was the technology team and not business intelligence, are we still dealing with business intelligence when I'm telling them to move your files to OneLake? Right? Because I'm thinking about this. If I'm doing more than just reporting at this point, and I'm coming to the team going, oh yeah, you're going to interact with your data and you're going to have more access to this outside of just reporting. Is that the role of business intelligence?
You're going to have more maybe I answer it in this way. Like Fabric offers me the opportunity to engage with these business users earlier in the process, allow them to see a lot more of how things are made, right? So if my argument to them is, hey, we're going to put your data here, the value, and what I was pushing back on you is that if I'm the business user, what's the value of me changing the way I do things for this? And I think it revolves around what we talked about, which is, hey, let me show you. I'm going to bring you along for the ride, but we're going to move your analytics data in this location. And look here, when we go out to the workspace, which is what you guys are familiar with for your reporting, here's what we're going to be building for you now, right? All of your analytics data, now it's accessible to you here, right? So we're building these, models or this ingestion for you, and here's all the business logic, and don't worry, we'll take care of it, but it's here for you to interact with and be the subject matter expert, and we're going to walk through these pieces. But if you want to do things on your own, or you want to spool up and do some different analysis, here's the new tools and capabilities that you have, and you don't have to muck around with all of the structural configurations and extraction of data and all the things we have to deal with when we're using independent services and all the like non-fabric, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just there. And that is super compelling. It's like, oh, well, of course I'm not going to use SharePoint now. I'm going to move my data into my analytics tooling right now, and then I can scale in that platform. Right.
Did
that answer your question?
No, that was phenomenal.
Okay.
And it doesn't necessarily raise more, but it triggers a ton of more, I think, situations, so to speak. So is there a COE or governance play here with OneLake File Explorer?
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, for sure there is.
Or should we close that for another day?
That's
based on the reaction. It was like, well,
oh boy. I mean, the COE should definitely have input as to what we're trying to do here, right? And to this point, right, there's more friction going to the SharePoint page than there is going to OneLake file storage, right? So the Center of Excellence should be deciding, okay, on certified data sets, should we have any SharePoint data set location connections? Is that something we want to be able to do? Do we want only items coming out of the lake house? Is there a criteria where we're saying, look, we are willing to say no SharePoint files, but SharePoint lists are acceptable? Where do we store our PBIX files? Do we put them somewhere? Do we put them in a common location? Does that live in SharePoint? So I think the COE has some input on those things, and more so on the items that are certified, regular. We know we have to repeat that data over and over again. I think it's nice to have options, but I think what Microsoft does a lot is they give you so many different options to do the same thing. It becomes incredibly confusing to know where's the best place to put things. What's the best way to organize it? Because there's not just one way of doing it. You have like 5. So you have to figure out, okay, what are the pros and cons of all these items? So Microsoft, thank you. Keeping contractors employed for the last 50 years, and looks like we're going to be going for another 50 just because we don't know where to put the files for everything.
Well, they viewed but they've like we talked about this before. Microsoft's an enabler, right? Like they build the core tools and leave a wide swath of opportunity for third parties to enhance or build specific solutions that help companies do things more with those tools.
Sure.
In the same way, like the options thing is good. It's just a challenge a challenge because when as I think business people, we go in, or you hear this all the time, like, well, just give us the standard way. Well, how do we implement it? Well, it depends. The answer, it depends. It depends because your organization, while very similar to other organizations in terms of data, et cetera, is its own unique beast, right? Like a process that you may build for your business may not work successfully in another one. And data culture could have a large part of that, like how data literate people are, et cetera. But in the options of like picking and choosing what a COE would make in terms of recommendations are based on probably driving efficiency within that organization. And each organization kind of has different needs, which is why you have the various routes that, and technical solutions that I think Microsoft offers a plethora of, to steer people down. But ultimately, like we're like those bodies are in place to create reliable outcomes and efficient outcomes within the business, right? So hopefully everybody starts to the outcomes of those decisions are not so people can go, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. It's so they start behaving that way, right? Because it's going to make something better for the business.
I agree. It's all about, again, a lot of these things I look at these features going, well, how does this make my life easier than what I've been doing? Can it make my life simpler, less complicated, less steps, less clicks? Like if it's doing those things, I feel like that's a good method to go down. If it's not increasing that level of simplicity on things, I'm more hesitant. Like, don't give me something that's more complicated. I'm not going to use it as much.
The only thing I would say to that is I wouldn't necessarily say that all the time where you're saying, Mike, because there's also the situation where there's some learning curve. And once you get past that hump, so to speak, then that's when everything begins to accelerate. I'm not saying this is the exact equivalent here, but if I'm integrating this, and this actually kind of goes to my hot take here, I do have one. which I think I'm going to get higher than a 1 with Seth on here. That's the goal. But if there is a slight learning curve where the end of that road or the end of that, like, okay, now we've got the process down when everything accelerates, that's kind of makes it worth it. So here's my hot take here. And this goes off some of the things I've been saying, but in the next 2 years, for organizations who have adopted Microsoft Fabric fully, notice I'm really giving myself some cushion here.
Oh boy.
The next 2 years, for an organization who has adopted Microsoft Fabric fully, OneLake File Explorer or an equivalent by Microsoft will be the de facto place your analytical random data will go.
Yeah, it's a 1.
Jeez Louise.
People are still going to do what they're going to do. Like, I don't think they're going to. I mean, it might be a little bit less friction. There might be a little bit more ease there, but I still think people are going to want to live in where they work all the time. It's going to be in Teams. It's going to be in SharePoint. It's going to be in OneDrive. I think that's going to be where a lot of that business data kind of just amasses because it's easy.
What are you as a consultant? What are you going to recommend? Or
don't do it, and don't do any of this. No, I don't know. I mean,
okay.
Who knows what tools will come out from these things, right? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of really rich things that are happening at the OneLake level, right? I think OneLake Storage Explorer all alone, just by itself, minimal impact.
Okay.
The tools that you can build on top of it, high potential. So I think the fact that you can access the OneLake, you can build tools that interact with it. You can build tools that do advanced things with your data and then put it back into the OneLake.
But then that's the value of it.
Well, yeah, that's the value of OneLake File Explorer.
I'm surprised you say that, actually.
I just don't use it a lot right now.
Well, I agree, because the
if you look, can I build so let me ask a question. Can I build a Power App off of things that live inside a OneLake?
Yeah. It's a SQL warehouse.
What was that?
As a SQL, if I have a OneLake.
Okay. So the OneLake.
If I have a lake house.
But you're going through the SQL endpoint to get to it, right?
Okay.
Not disagreeing with you, just saying, like, there's other things like making Power Apps on top of SharePoint lists. It's pretty seamless and easy. You've got to know what you're doing in Power Apps to get to tables like inside Lakehouse.
Sure.
Yeah. Not like any applications. Microsoft is removing the friction from building those things inside other applications. Like, so SharePoint already has a nice, easy, list editing system that is better than managing a single file inside a OneLake. So to me, there's things already that exist that are making that easier. Now, if you build me a workload that does this stuff, and then I can have a series of files that exist inside OneLake that I can go make lists and edit and all these other things, and it just becomes a data source, then I think I would recommend it more. But I think there needs to be more enhancement on the usability on the front end side. Again, I think to your point, Seth, earlier, was Microsoft just builds a framework. The framework's there. The framework, I think, is important. But the tools that we're actually able to use and interact with OneLake stuff, they're not there yet. People haven't come up with the ideas.
So it's interesting. I'll actually give you like a 3 to 4, Tommy.
I'll take that.
Like in 2 years time, like, you think about the compelling argument of like centralizing your data store, right? Like, if my analytics data currently in OneLake is now accessible to me in Fabric and tooling, right? Faster and easier, because I'm not copying versions of data. Right, I'm not creating my own version of something. It's not ETL into Fabric. It's just the file.
Right.
I think there's some potential complications of like not having versioning. Right, like, is that a big deal? Well, it is in the business realms. In SharePoint, it's how many times have we been saved by backing some stuff up? So like, I kind of vacillate a little bit backwards and forwards, but in 2 years' time, I would argue that, yeah, the vast majority of like not managed data is probably a better way than saying some of the, like, just the masses in OneLake is probably where organizations centralize around. And I would even argue, like, further than that, is one of the I think bigger things with OneLake and what it offers is the repository of all meaningful data, potentially, that could be leveraged with AI.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think that would be, again, Not going to disagree with you on those points.
Disparate systems.
It's all over the place.
We mentioned SharePoint, but we have OneDrive. We have, how many different locations are people storing data in already? And if this moves more into a centralization of that analytical data, then I there's a lot of value there. Yeah, I think I agree with you though. It's taking it's going to take a little bit to like fully recognize or realize all of the value that it provides, and is it enough right now, even to my previous argument, to push people into it, right? And that's where, as a business user, I need a reason why you're going to change my process or the way I do things. And typically that's when you show there's more value to them in other fashions.
What if we could just do shortcuts to OneLake, from OneLake into SharePoint? Yeah, what if SharePoint we just go shortcut things right from there? Then you just leave it where it is. You don't have to really worry about it. It just shows up in the OneLake.
Listen, I'm with you. I am completely frustrated. How is there not Power Automate or Power Apps into Fabric? Why is there not any connection? But I have 17 scorecard ones if I want to use it. Why?
But these are kind of my points. Like I think the user community has not quite asked for the things that they want in the right way so that we get what we need out of it. And, things that I would like OneLake to be doing more, right? I would like the ability to be able to turn on versioning. I'd like to see the versions of, like, this is all top of blob storage. Blob storage already has versioning of files already. So if I have that feature, the same way I have it in OneDrive, just figure it out for me, Microsoft. If I want this folder to have versions tracked, that's what I want. Turn it on. So that way, to your point, Seth and Tommy, like I would feel more confident moving more of my business workloads out of SharePoint and other things and centralizing them around. These are things that are BI central workloads, and we're going to do all that workload only inside Fabric. I think that solves that problem. The other caveat that I'm thinking about here is you have to have all of the Fabric turned on. This doesn't work if you just have half Pro, half Fabric. So this is going to be a Fabric enabled everything. So to your point, Tommy, earlier, these are for organizations that are going to fully adopt Fabric everywhere across all workspaces, across all team members. And I'm not sure companies are willing to pay for that yet or have justified that in their minds at this point. We might get there, but right now I'm not sure if all companies are like, yeah, we want to pay for Pro licenses for our developers and give all this other access to the parts of the business. I think they're going to want to have a mix of Pro licenses, especially the ones that have E5s, because they get Pro by default, right? So the story for them to move over to Fabric is like, let's pay more money so we can put files not in SharePoint that we're already paying for. Like, I don't know.
Good point.
We'll have to kind of tease it out a bit more in a future episode.
Go build your pipeline to SharePoint.
Oh, no, thank you. I'm not doing that. We've literally just said, screw it. We're just going to use data flows. So it was not worth the time or the effort to figure it out. Anyways, that being said, thank you very much for this interesting topic. I hope you found some value from this one, though. Thank you. Jumping on the comments would be awesome. So thank you, comments. Jumping in here a little bit as well, telling some things about what you feel about OneLake and how things are going to be integrated as well. With that, if you like this conversation, if you found this to be valuable, please go out and share this conversation. Let someone else know you liked it, either on social media or you found some insightful information. We'd love to hear from you. What you pulled from this. Are you using OneLake File Explorer? How do you use it? We don't know everything. We think we do, but we don't. For sure we don't. So we'd love to hear from you. Get some feedback. Tell us what is working for you and what's not. That being said, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. Join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of powerbi.tips social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.